I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Like, share, comment, subscribe. You know all the things to do. And this funny little cube sitting in front of me is called the Ouya. Ouya? What's it to ya? And what does it do for ya? Well, I'm going to tell you all about it, starting with the fact that it was a successfully funded Kickstarter project first launched by Julie Ehrman in 2012. In hindsight, it's actually famous or maybe even infamous for being one of the fastest and most successfully funded projects in Kickstarter history. Now, I won't give you their entire pitch. I'm going to boil it down to the short version, which is everybody plays games on Android phones these days, but what if we took that same Android phone, shoved it in a box, gave it HDMI output, and put a controller with it? Then we could call it a video game console, or as they later came to be known, micro consoles. And hey, if you have a Retroid Pocket right now, you own a micro console too. Now, the reason I decided to make this video today is I've had an Ouya for a really long time, but I've always used it with a PlayStation 3 controller. But today, as luck would have it, I found an authentic Ouya controller at a thrift store marked as is for $10. And I just had to try it. I had to take that chance. I had to roll the dice and see if I could use a real Ouya controller. They're kind of funky. There are no cords of any kind, and it's also not rechargeable. As you saw just a moment ago, you actually have to take the faceplate off on the left and the right side and put one AA battery in each of those compartments. And let me tell you, you want to use the little fabric strap and put it underneath each battery, or those batteries are a bitch to get out. So they included the fabric for a reason. Put it underneath the battery when you put the batteries in. Then when you want to change batteries, you can pull the fabric up. Or if you just want to take the batteries out because you're not going to use it for a while. Now, as luck would have it, when I bought my Ouya, it came preloaded with some games that the previous owner had used. They did not wipe it, and I'm glad they did not, because the Ouya servers are offline. You can no longer purchase or install games the traditional way. There are third-party servers, and I'm not going into that in this video, but if enough people are interested in it, I could set it up for third-party Ouya servers, so please let me know in the comments or via social media if you follow me on any of the platforms, Blue Sky, X, Threads, whatever. You can contact me and say, hey, Mr. MegaManFan, show us the custom servers that Ouya can run on today, and we'll get into that later. But for now, I've got a few games on here. You saw You Don't Know Jack. You're seeing Cinemora right now. And this game is certainly not locked to the Ouya platform. It's available on a lot of different things. So if you like what you're seeing here, go look for Cinemora, Sinemora. Just Google search it and you'll find the many different types of consoles that you can run this on today. And that's another thing that's infamous about Ouya, as long as I'm on the subject. They had a bounty program for people to develop games for the Ouya, and while some people genuinely did use it to launch their indie games, there were also a lot of people who did the bare minimum to get a cash grab from the Kickstarter funding that they had raised and pocket the money and then just throw a bunch of asset flips that were cheap, low-cost Android games onto the Ouya. So it kind of backfired that they had a bounty program. Slope's Game Room has a video all about this. You can go watch it. It's not quite Kick Scammer, but it definitely was a little bit sus. And I think it's partly that Ouya had high ambitions, but didn't necessarily understand the market that they were getting into. There were a lot of tone-deaf presentations that they did about the Ouya where they just didn't really understand gamers. I'm just going to boil it down to that. But they did actually ship the Ouya to the backers on Kickstarter. We can't say that they didn't do that. And the Ouya did have a brief run in stores. You could go to retail outlets like Best Buy and get one for yourself. And at launch, there was genuine hype for the Ouya. People thought it was going to be the low-cost alternative to things like Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo. So I give them some measure of credit. It could have worked. Maybe even it should have worked. But mismanagement and ego and maybe even just plain stupidity derailed the Ouya, and it never really found its place. But it lives on in the form of the fact that you can run Android emulators and Android games on pretty much any smartphone other than Apple phones. And consequently, Apple, realizing they were losing market share to Android phones, started allowing emulators on their app stores. So it all comes full circle at the end of the day. And speaking of emulators, Ouya has one called Nostalgia, which is, I'd call it a RetroArch Lite. There might be a full RetroArch that can run on Ouya, but this one does a pretty good job. I've got a bunch of NES ROMs loaded into it right now, and I'm going to show you Mega Man running on it. Now, there is no start and select, but because there are two analog sticks, you can press the right one down. You can do a D3 click, or whatever you want to call it, and that's your start button. And if you push down on the other analog stick, that's your select button. And if you need to get to the menu, you hit the Ouya circle button at the bottom of the controller. And you double tap that same button if you want to break all the way out and go back to the main menu of your Ouya. That works for pretty much any game on the console, let alone these emulators. Now, what can I say about the Ouya controller itself since I picked one up for $10 today? Well, I can play Mega Man with it. That's sort of my benchmark for whether or not a controller is any good. If I can't beat at least the Bubble Man stage of Mega Man 2, then I kind of think a controller sucks. But this one has a functional D-pad and functional buttons, and thankfully, mine was not abused, probably because the person who owned the Ouya never used it that much. That seems to be the story for a lot of Ouyas, other than the one I bought used, because somebody had already loaded games and emulators on it. So at least one Ouya out there got some love, and now that it's in my collection, it's getting a little more. But yes, this Ouya controller paired up relatively easily with the Ouya that I owned, and all the buttons on it seem to be working the way they should, and I'm playing Mega Man quite successfully here. No, I'm not saying you should rush out to get an Ouya for custom servers or emulators or anything of the sort. However, if you found a little cube marked Ouya and it was on sale at a thrift store, or they just didn't know what they had and put it in a bin full of miscellaneous things, you might pick it up and have some fun with it. As I said, you can plug a PS3 controller into it via USB, and it even stays paired when you unplug it from USB. So somehow, the Ouya developers knew that people were going to need controllers other than their own, and they accounted for that. So good for them that you can pair a PS3 controller with this thing. And it's a neat little piece of video game history. And if I'm nothing else, I'm a fan of video game history. So the Ouya has a place for me. So what's it to you? Well, to me, it's video games and history and experimentation, because there are people who are doing custom things with Ouya today. So if you want to see all of that, get back to me in the comments or socials. Let me know you want to see some more of this micro console. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and as always, thank you for watching.